As a kid, I was a tomboy. I climbed trees, I body surfed, and I built lots of sandcastles. As a teenager, I was obsessed with art, design, fashion, and architecture. And in college, I studied architecture. Because of my childhood, I was drawn to architecture that connected with nature. The first building that made me realize how amazing architecture can be was the Sox Institute in San Diego. It visually and poetically connected with the ocean. And when I learned that Louis Kahn had designed the building, I started to study him intensely. And what I learned was, not only was he an amazing architect, he was a great thinker. And over the years, what has stuck with me most was one of his sayings, and it went something like this: if you have all the answers at the beginning of a project, you have not asked the right questions. So what are the right questions? For me, this varies and depends on the project. I always start with inspiration and start asking questions that are relevant and pertinent to the design. But that's not when the good questions happen for me. No, the really insightful questions happen when the design fails. When the design fails, you're able to see the flaws and limitations with the design. And it's at this point that you can start to ask the really good questions. I love what I do. I love it so much that I'm often not very objective about it. And I don't know what works and what doesn't work, but when it fails, it's really obvious what doesn't work. And it's at this point I can abandon the parts that don't work and consider alternative paths that in the end make the design much better than I had initially dreamed up of. And that's because it's based in the real world. My first product design, the LV series, is case in point for how I start with inspiration and embrace failing through the entire design process. I wanted to create an affordable, modern, fabricated solution that was connected with nature, such that the interior framed the exterior like a work of art. To achieve this, we tucked all the cluttered spaces like closets, bathrooms, and kitchen in the back of the home. And we designed a structural system that was welded on site. And it worked beautifully. It allowed us to have big, expansive spaces that allowed us to frame nature like a work of art. But it failed to meet one of our goals, and that was to make an affordable, easy-to-build home. You see, the contractor at the time that we had hired wasn't familiar with welding on site, so we had to outsource this portion of the build. It took us 2 weeks to find a welder, and then another week for the welder to weld the steel posts to the steel beams. And by this time, the entire crew had left the job for another project. And it took another 2 weeks to get them back on the job working. So when it was all said and done, this small portion of the build took 5 weeks to build. It was ridiculous and way over budget. This failure led us to reconsider how we build our structural system. Since general contractors are familiar with wood construction techniques, we designed a system that allowed any general contractor to use their regular wood tools. So now we use a prefabricated steel post with welded top and bottom plates with pre-drilled holes that allow any general contractor to assemble these posts in less than 1 day and at a fraction of what it costs to weld on site. The first LV was in Laguna Verde, Chile. It's a beautiful part of the world with a remarkable Mediterranean weather, and our home worked wonderfully there. However, at the time, we failed to consider other climates and orientations. Because I wanted the LV to be available worldwide, this made us step back and look at how it would perform in both hot and cold climates. So we started doing energy calculations so we could better study how to make it more energy efficient. What we came up with was a 2-wall panel system that allows the LV to be twice as energy efficient. We achieved it by increasing the R value in the walls and in the roof twofold. This 2-wall panel system also allows us to solve other problems. It allows us to hide every modern architect's enemy, pitched roofs and gutters. It also allows us to collect water, and that is a great thing because then you can attach it to a water catchment system and conserve water. To make the LV affordable, it was critical to make it affordable to ship. Our strategy to do this was to include all the signature design components that fit on one semi-trailer. The original LV was not designed to fit on a semi-trailer, so what we started to do was study the footprint of a semi, and it's 8 foot by 48 feet. So what we did was we designed every panel to not exceed the 8-foot dimension. And while this solution worked beautifully, from the factory to our customer site, it failed the minute forklifts started to unload them. So at that time, we were advising general contractors to use forklifts with 8-foot extensions. These contractors often forgot the 8-foot extensions, while others simply couldn't find them. Because of that, they had to manually unload the 8-foot wide panels. So what we did was we learned about this issue, incorporated this dimensional constraint that forklifts only have 4-foot forks, and now the wall panels are 4 foot, so any forklift can take them down, as well as you can fit them side by side on a semi. Construction is a messy affair, filled with many failures throughout the entirety of the process. And part of having a good prefabricated design is about anticipating these failures and designing around them. I have yet to see a foundation that is dimensionally perfect. It's too hard. Contractors are out in the elements, and they're also concerned in making the foundation level and square. Most foundations are off by 1/2 inch, and the really amazing ones are off by only 1/16 of an inch. So when we were designing our sheet metal package, I had this in the back of my head. And the way that we fabricate our panels is in a factory environment. They all have pre-hemmed backs so that they're really easy to install on site and they're dimensionally perfect. However, in our package, we leave one piece that is oversized so that your sheet metal contractor can accommodate for any dimensional discrepancy into that last piece. So irrespective of how imperfect your foundation may be, your sheet metal looks perfect each and every time. One could argue that my thesis isn't truly about failure, and it's more about the process of refinement, when the product evolves over time into a more sophisticated product. And yes, I can see that point, and in certain parts, our process really is about the process of refinement. However, there is a difference. When the product is failing, there is an urgency to change the design that simply isn't present with the process of refinement. Failing is a gift, as it allows the product to mature much more quickly. Over the course of the past 15 years, our LV has evolved through this slower-paced process of refinement. We've been able to introduce new LV models and add-ons, as well as seamlessly integrate design options, as well as offer custom, unique solutions. Before I leave you tonight, I'd like to share with you our latest products that also can be put in an LV. I was inspired again by nature. Hexagons are prevalent in nature due to their efficiency, and they inspired me to design this fire pit, hexagon end table, these hexagon coasters with cubic pattern, overlay pattern, node pattern, and then I wanted to evoke modern simplicity through these pieces. This is a square frame candle holder, a rectangular candle holder. And then this is an end table that can be used as a wood storage unit as well. Growing up, I was afraid to fail. I thought that if I failed, that meant I was a failure. And as an adult, I've learned that this simply is not true. And I've learned the most valuable lessons through my failures. And as a designer, I've learned that if I'm not failing, I'm not innovating. So embrace failing. Learn from failure. It will take you far.